All right, everyone. So welcome back to Veterans for Cannabis. I'm Jared, and as always, joining me is Big C. This is going to
Hello,
be
guys.
a 10-part series. And as you caught last week's episode, we spent a lot of time discussing the Supreme Court's recent decision involving cannabis and the Second Amendment. We looked at the headlines, talked about what the ruling could mean for veterans and medical cannabis patients. And we began asking some very important questions about constitutional rights, public safety, and the future for federal cannabis policy. And after we wrapped up that episode, something became very clear. We had only scratched the surface. And as we continued researching the case, reading the court's opinion, reviewing federal firearm law, and examining the government's ongoing efforts to reclassify cannabis, we realized there was much more to this story than we could fit into one discussion. So today's episode isn't correction, it's a continuation. We're going to slow things
Mhm.
down a bit, answer some of the questions we didn't have time to explore last week. What exactly did the Supreme Court decide? Who was Ali Hemani, and why did his case become a constitutional landmark? Why do federal law still treats cannabis differently from alcohol? How does the ATF fit into all of this? And what does cannabis reclassification actually mean? And how is it different from legalization or descheduling? Most importantly, what does all of this mean for veterans like us who use medical cannabis, for responsible fire owners, and for the future of constitutional rights in America? And as we get going, we're going to go ahead and get into part one. So we're going to have to
Mhm.
understand the background, right? And to understand this case, we need to go back more than 50 years. So in
Oh, yeah.
1970, Congress passed the Controlled Substance Act. The law established the federal scheduling system for drugs. Marijuana was placed into Schedule 1. Under federal law, Schedule 1 substances are considered to have a high potential for abuse. No, no currently accepted medical use and lack of accepted safety for use under medical supervision. Whether people agree with that classification or not, it has remained the basis for federal cannabis policy for the decades. At the same time, federal firearm law has long prohibited certain categories of individuals from possessing firearms. And one of those restrictions appears in 18 United States Code Section 922 G3. It states that an unlawful user of or addicted to a controlled substance may not possess firearms or ammunition. Because marijuana remains federally controlled, that restriction has historically applied to cannabis users, even in states where cannabis is legal under state law. That legal conflict has existed for years. Many states recognize medical marijuana. Many states have legalized adult recreational use. Federal law has not fully caught up. What say you, Carlos?
Mhm. No, I think it's very important that we go back to even, I believe, nearly 40 years before 1970, because the Marijuana Tax Act, 1937, that was a big factor of what we are right now. Back then, this pretty much tax act was taxing the sale and production or cultivation of cannabis, right? 1965, the Drug Abuse Control Amendment was established, pretty much giving the federal government the ability to regulate thing, drugs, right? And then Nixon in 1970 did this ask Congress to create a scheduling, right? And that's when again they start placing start placing specific drugs, alcohol, whatever into scheduling. Um, my question is, and again, the scheduling on the scheduling. Why? Maybe I should ask Google on this, but why would they schedule marijuana so high in the scheduling system?
Yeah, that's a great question because hasn't like in the cannabis through the 1800s up until like 1930, right? 1935, right? It was something people used frequently
Right.
for pain,
And that's what it
for
seems.
illness.
Yeah.
So the question is, what
Mhm.
happened from that time period on in? What made cannabis bad in that regards moving
Okay.
forward? Does that make sense? There has to be.
Yeah.
There's a reason, right?
So I did ask Google. I just love AI in today's society. They got the answer to everything, right? Pretty much what they said, because they didn't have no data, no scientific definition. That was the reason they scheduled it number one. For because they didn't know what else to do. Which I mean, it makes sense if you don't have no idea of what's what. But why it took so long to schedule it, right? Why? What's your theory? I think my theory has to do with money.
That's one of the things I've come to as well, and one of my conclusions that has to do with money. And I'm also thinking it has to do with because it's shown that it can heal, right? I mean, that's
Hmm.
another thing. I mean, there's plenty of evidence that cannabis has a lot of healing properties. So,
Hmm.
could it be both kind of money and the fact that
Hmm.
it actually heals? Or is it
I
more
mean,
based on or control at the same time?
or it could be misinformation too, right? Over here, what question did I ask? I asked a really good question. Why did it take so long, right? And they said for decades, the conversation's been around for decades, right? Including in 1988, when a judge pretty much said, marijuana should be scheduled out of number one, but the DEA refused, overruled the judge in a decision upheld later by federal courts. Uh, um, Let me see. And I think, like I said, I agree with you. It has a lot to do with money.
You
Change
know,
rules.
hey, when I first came back from Iraq, um, I was with my cousin. It was the first time that I had tried
Mhm.
cannabis, and I was still in the military then. And I remember when I hit it for that first time, how calm I became. And I asked myself, I've been told my entire life that this was bad, but in
Right,
just one hit,
right.
I wasn't high, I wasn't doing anything stupid. For the first time in my
Yeah,
life, my hand stopped shaking. I became very, really calm, right?
right.
Collected. And my thoughts had gathered back.
Hmm.
At that point, I wasn't erratic. Thank you. So,
Right.
and those are experiences that, everybody has different experiences with cannabis, but that I wanted to just share this at this time. It just felt good to share, but
Yeah,
that's my personal experience with cannabis. It didn't feel like I
yeah.
was using a controlled substance, if that makes sense. But
Hmm. Right. Uh, um, my brain is like my brain is rolling, right? Because it seems like scientists have known there is a potential benefit of marijuana. It seems since a good time, you know, um, kind of weird. It's kind of weird, right? That I didn't know, again, I'm getting this out of AI. Biden actually blocked the rescheduling. Biden
Wow.
administration said, and this is what the inner said, federal law dictate that agencies cannot simply change a drug scheduling overnight. They must adhere to the Administrative Procedure Act, APA, which mandate a grueling multi-steps process. So what that means to me, that means very much the same excuse that they had for immigration, in my opinion. Their hands were tied because of the law, right? And ultimately, that was that's how I'm reading it. I might be incorrect, but that's how I'm reading it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but why? Why it took so long? That's my question. Like, really, why is money? Hmm. Okay, this is gonna be a theory, right? This is a 56-year delay in rescheduling marijuana was caused by an intentional structure barrier within the Controlled Substance Act called the eight-factor analysis. Okay, it makes sense. So check this is my theory, okay? The Schedule Act passed in 1970. 1980, they had the war on drugs, okay, which it is known very widely that the CIA had a big um they were funding um government, being overthrown by selling drugs in the United States, in other words, right? Like Google it, CIA Contra operation. I think that's the operation, right? No, I think because they knew they effed up so bad, they had to put a headlock on anything that might bring questions on the war on drugs. I don't know if that makes sense to you. Like we were never. I don't think we were never allowed to discuss the crack epidemic, running drugs from South America to United States, by the government. I don't. That is my theory. I mean, it has a lot to do with going back, 40 years, 50 years ago. I don't know. I might be going crazy. I don't know.
Well, for me, I'm always go right back to my question is why was marijuana scheduled the way it was when it was used for so long up until the 1930s? I mean, I think that's
Well,
confusion for me
yeah.
comes.
I mean, we can say the same thing about heroin, cocaine. It's being used from natives, before Christ, whatever, right? It's
Right.
being
Right.
used, you know, but why, schedule it? Because, we only knew, it was what we saw on the street that people were getting, excuse my language, effed up. You know, it was the misconception and the lack of information. Like, you only saw what you saw and you assume it's marijuana or any drugs. That is my theory. Uh, um, but I think it continued being there because, again, control of people. That's what I would like to say. I mean, that's what drugs are, controlling people.
Right.
So they were trying to control, yeah. I mean, that's the only thing I can think of. Um, I mean, the big eight, actual or relative potential of for abuse. Okay. Scientific evidence of its pharmaceutical effect, right? Current state of scientific knowledge, history of quote unquote abuse, scope, duration, and significance abuse, risk to the public health, um, psychedelic or psychological dependency, liability, and whether the substance is immediate or if the substance can be immediately abused, pretty much, right? That was the big eight, the government justifications the government was using to put it in category one.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah, but
Very.
I'm gonna be honest with you. Okay, I'd rather take this extreme than the extreme of them legalizing vaccines overnight. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Following me?
Yeah. No, I follow
Like,
you. 100%.
yes, yes, it is. It probably was not fair. This is one extreme, but the other extreme is do what they did with COVID and pretty much study this vaccine, for a couple of weeks and then give it to the people. I would like to be somewhere in between, in the middle, right? There's an emergency procedure, and then there is a common sense moving forward. I think it should be like that for anything that we can potentially put in our body, including alcohol and tobacco, which I think they already are, but that's my point.
No, I agree with you. I mean, I do a lot of research myself before I take anything, whether it's natural, especially when it's helping with my blood pressure. I was telling you before we got on, I was taking berberine. I take berberine to
Right.
help with my sugar and my blood pressure. And I've done a lot of research, and I take the amount that it was when I read clinical trials. So I make sure I take the amount that when that clinical trial said it was known to help, right? So I research is
Mhm.
very important to making a decision. So I agree. Same with vaccines or anything. Yes, I want research. I want to know, is it safe through clinical trial before I put something in my body. Same with cannabis. We have research on
Mhm.
cannabis. We've all read it. Our independent research and made our decision according to what we've researched. Right? Yeah. No, I agree with you. So,
But we are at 18 minutes. I don't mean to turn this politics, okay? By no means, okay? But I have to because I just seen a pattern real quick. Who was president in? So the first sentencing act signed into law to reduce a statutory disparity between crack and powder cocaine sentencing from 100 to 1 to 18 to 1, aiming to curb mass incarceration. Who was president in 2010?
Barack Obama.
Okay, okay, okay. Um, State legislation began Colorado and Washington 2012. 2018, the Farm Bill, and finally on the schedule hemp. 2012 was Obama, right?
Hmm? Yes.
So that's state level legislation, okay. Supremacy clause makes sense. Who was president in 2018?
Donald J. Trump.
Okay, that is the Farm Bill. The scheduling hemp with less than 0.3 THC, removing it entirely from the, CSA. I don't know what the hell that is. And legalizing CBD products. May 2024, federal rescheduling process. Who was Well, we know who was president in May 2024, right? Who was that? That's
Joe Biden.
Biden, right?
Hmm?
That was Trump, 24? Okay.
No,
December
Joe Biden.
25.
Yeah,
Huh?
yeah, Joe Biden in 2024. Yeah,
Okay. So that's scheduling. Okay. December 25th. Okay. So Biden started the process. December 2025, executive order to pretty much accelerate, to pretty much Trump say, hurry up and do this shit.
right.
And June 2026, final rescheduling hearing begins. My point is this, right? Fair Sentences Act, and they focus on crack and powder, cocaine. Okay, people that was selling marijuana in 2010 was getting a stiffer sentence than those selling crack cocaine and heroin.
Hmm.
Okay, and let me look at this real quick. Sentencing between crack and marijuana. And we're going on 20 minutes, right?
We're on almost 22 right now.
Okay. Um in 2010. Let me see something. In 2010. Because I think the sentencing was stiffer then. I think we're getting into ATF next week, so yeah. Wow. Okay. So in 2010, I'm gonna leave it with this real quick, okay? While the Fair Sentencing Act reformed the unfair 100 to 1 sentencing disparity between crack and powder cocaine, federal enforcement and sentencing for marijuana were at all-time peak. I'm gonna leave it there.
Mhm.
And that opened up the door to the ATF next week.
Okay. Wow. Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, again, I'm not gonna make it political, but that is kind of counterproductive in 2010. But that's just me. Anyhow, thank you everybody. Again, we're flying from the hip. Next week, I promise I'll do a lot better. But honestly, I like AI. I love Gemini. And also because I just can ask the question that comes to mind in between the conversation. So I'm not saying go get Gemini. I'm not saying, but I'm just saying use the resources that you have right now. Just don't listen to what people say to you. Make sure you fact check. All right. Anyways, Jerry, you got anything for the good of the group?
No, that's all I have. It's been awesome. Thank you all again for
No, no.
following. Please like, share, and subscribe. Repost, right? Repost if you're on like TikTok,
Please.
repost on YouTube. Please share out the content, engage. Liking really helps the algorithm for us. But that's all I
Yes.
have. With my
All right,
brother.
guys. Thank you, man. Peace.
I'm out, man. Love you all. I'm out.
Hey, wow. Peace.